we need international cooperation, but the main driver of the Amazonian policy is domestic policy.
Welcome to another edition of the Forum 2000 online chat. My name is Sasha Hanik, and today our guest is Eduardo Viola. Eduardo Viola is a doctor of political science and has been visiting professor at several North America and European universities: Stanford, Colorado, Notre Dame, Georgetown, Amsterdam, and Bonn. He is professor of international relations at the University of Brasilia. He is a member of various Brazilian and international scientific committees and has published extensively on comparative political systems, globalization, and governance. Also, international environmental policy, international security, and inter-American relations. He was born in Argentina and is a naturalized Brazilian. He is also senior researcher at the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of Sao Paulo. Eduardo, thank you for being with us today. It is an honor to speak with you and ask you about such important topics.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mr. Viola, in general terms, what has your research concluded about the relationship between environmental issues and international relations? And how do you see this relation in practice today in Brazil?
Okay, well, of course, more and more, we have had in the last 3 decades a growing importance, both in reality and in international system and in international studies of environmental issues. That we have the global environmental issues. Today, the 3 more important are, first of all, climate change, second, biodiversity erosion, and third, ocean acidification and pollution by plastics. Okay, those are the 3 more important global environmental problems. And of course, when we go to environmental issues, we have a lot of environmental issues that are local, national, like, for example, air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, areas protected of biodiversity, deforestation. And Brazil is a very important country in the global environmental policy and politics, because it is very important for several reasons, particularly the fact that the carbon stock of the Amazon forest is very, very huge. Is comparable to around 10 years of emissions, global emissions of carbon dioxide equivalent. Okay, so it's key to protect the Amazon forest because of this very treasury carbon stock, but also because of biodiversity. Though in terms of biodiversity, Brazil has other very relevant biomes besides the Amazon, like the Cerrado Savannah, where I am right now in Brasilia, and the freshwater marsh, the Pantanal, Mato Grossense, that is very large, and the remaining of the Atlantic forest is very important in biodiversity. In relation to the oceans, Brazil has a very, very vast littoral coast. And for that reason, it's very important what happened in the Brazilian coast in terms of plastic pollution, for example, that go to the deep sea, and in terms of ocean acidification, because the ocean this is derived from carbon emissions, that a part is goes to the atmosphere, but another part goes to the oceans. Without the ocean capacity of sequestering carbon, the global warming would be much more accelerated, for example. Okay, so this is more or less what I can say is that Brazil has been a kind of very bad performance during the period that goes from the end of the 1980s to 2004, because carbon emissions coming from deforestation were extremely high, though on the other side also Brazil shift position in the engagement with international system in relation to environmental negotiations. And for that reason, Brazil was the venue of the Rio 92 conference. That was very relevant because of the climate convention, the biodiversity convention, the Agenda 21st, and so on.
In that sense, you mentioned Brazil's performance on environmental issues. And I think people ask about what is the responsibility of domestic policies to counter environmental problems that are international. Do you think, considering the current conditions, for example, in the Amazonian rainforest, that we should be looking at international policies to counter environmental issues such as the ones you mentioned? Because, for example, when you mentioned ocean pollution, it's obviously not an issue that only one country is responsible for, but also when one country takes domestic actions, they don't necessarily will target the global issues. So what is your view on that topic? How can countries collaborate to target these environmental but also geopolitical issues?
Oh, it's key. Global cooperation among countries is key for tackling global environmental problems. Okay, in the case of climate change, this is very, very obvious. But for example, there are countries that have more responsibility in producing the problem of climate change, because have a significant proportion of share of global carbon emissions. Brazil is one of those countries. Though it's not on the top, that is in United States, European Union, China, and India, but is immediately after with Japan, Indonesia, and so Russia. So to tackle the domestic Brazilian policy in relation to the Amazon, in relation to deforestation, particularly, that is the most high proportion of emission in Brazil, is key. I would say that we need international cooperation, but the main driver of the Amazonian policy is domestic policy. Right now, we're in a very terrible situation, as everybody knows about, because we have a government that is negationist of climate change and pandemics, let's say, okay? So it's probably the worst government in the world today, the Brazilian government, though there has been increasing opposition to the government in the society, both in relation to pandemics and in relation to environmental issues, and particularly climate change and the Amazonian policy. Okay, so in relation to the ocean, Brazil is also a very important country because it has a lot of coastal areas. Okay, so that are so Brazil is very important for two reasons. One is because it has a significant share of global carbon emission, around 3%. Okay. And the other is because it has a very vast coast.
Yeah, it goes all over the Atlantic, the South Atlantic.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's I don't remember exactly now, but I think it's around 8,000 kilometers of coast. Goes from the south in Rio Grande do Sul, in the border with Uruguay, to the north and the border with French Guiana.
So what you're saying is that given the natural conditions of your country, there is a domestic responsibility rather than only giving or having a participation into global commitments. Because of the conditions of the country, you have the territory in the Amazonian rainforest, and you have this coastal territory that you mentioned. So you see that Brazilian citizens should feel responsible for the policies that concern, for example, the environment due to the territory that the country has in South America?
Oh, yeah, I think they must feel responsible, but for sure there is just a proportion of the Brazilian population that feels responsible, okay? And this varies a little according to the years. It's a lot correlated with education. High education people feel more responsible, okay? But of course, I mean, there is an interplay of both domestic and international. And so, for example, during the period 2005 to 2018, Brazil was committed to international cooperation in Brazil. For example, there is the Amazonian Fund that is funded by Norway mostly, but also by Germany, and that is committed to protect the Amazon, and is very relevant. And there was a lot of Brazil welcomed this fund and implemented it over the years. Okay, now this has changed dramatically with the Bolsonaro administration because the Amazonian Fund is paralyzed. Why? Because the original contractual requirements were not anymore fulfilled by the Brazilian government.
I understand. I would like to end this conversation by asking you about a more recent factor, that is COVID-19. And when we connect this main global issue with the topic of environment, how do you see that, or how in your view has COVID-19 changed the scenario in terms of carbon emissions and international attitudes towards climate change and its countermeasures? There are people who say, like, well, lockdowns take people inside their houses, and therefore there is less carbon emissions, and some who argue that we don't know still what the consequences of COVID-19 will be to the environment. Some people even say that, for example, the mass production of masks for people's faces will add another layer of pollution to the ocean. So there are many factors, and I would like to know your view about how these elements interact in environmental issues, in environmental terms at the end.
This is a very, very important question. According to the data I am aware, there has been some reduction in carbon emissions globally in 2020. Okay, we don't have definitive data, but the estimations vary between 3 and 5% of reduction, okay, of global carbon emissions. This from one side. Mm-hmm. From the other side, there is a very important dynamic, that is, there has been an increase in the perception of the threat of climate change and biodiversity erosion because of the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so for example, the climate change is for most people, middle and low educated people in the world, a remote threat. The idea of global warming is very difficult to capture beside the people with scientific education or with high education. And the manifestation that is concrete for most people of climate change, of global warming, is extreme weather events. Okay, this is what people feel, and for that reason, because of the increase of the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events, there has been gradually in the last 20 years an increase in an awareness about the problem of climate change in the global society. Mm-hmm. So it is the idea that an intangible threat global warming is becoming more and more tangible through the extreme weather events. Okay, well, something the pandemic, COVID pandemic, is more or less the same. The scientific community, particularly the epidemiologists, okay, we are very aware that the question was not if, but it was when will be the next global pandemics. This at least since the 1990s, okay? So there is no surprise about this pandemic in the global, in the scientific community. Even the surprise is at some point some good news, because this virus is, at least in the more classical variety strain, it is less. It is not very lethal, though it's increasing lethality with the new strains like the Brazilian P1 strain. So so now the perception that something is real, that was intangible for most people, the pandemic, and now is tangible and dramatically impact the everyday life. So promote a more deep awareness about the threat of climate change. This is a major relation. The other thing, what has happened is that in some areas of the world, governments and societies are manifesting the intention of producing a green recovery, okay? Having a new kind of, not coming back to the past. And so interrelating the issue of the pandemic with climate change. And we have this, in this area, the European Union was key, okay? And, but also finally, with the outcome of the election in the United States, both the election of President Biden and afterwards in January, the election of 2 Democratic senators in Georgia. So we have a democratic government with majority in both houses of Congress and the presidents. And so the United States has changed dramatically its domestic and international position, with a strong impact all over the world. Okay, even in Brazil, that was a government completely supporting Trump re-election and is mimetic of the Trump administration. The government now is disoriented, trying to accommodate a little bit the new reality, okay? So, but it's not just in Europe and United States. There are other countries where the awareness about the importance of having a green recovery has been increasing. I could say even about your country, Chile, but also, of course, the more usual suspected, like Costa Rica, within Latin America, like Colombia, for example, is also moving in that direction, okay? So there are, this is something new, there's a new trend that will be very important. In relation to the ocean, is key, what you said has been key. For tourism, not just the masks, but the dramatic increase in e-commerce and delivery by mail, okay? So this is, for example, this is my experience. I mean, I was not almost used it at all to buy to buy online. I bought online, but a few small proportion. Now most of what I buy comes or online. So, and this is a lot of packages. A lot of so the increase in waste for package has increased dramatically. This is a terrible unintentional consequence of how to protect from COVID-19. So I would say that there are and those are not the only consequence. There are other consequences that are also not good for the environment.
Thank you very much for this conversation. Actually, we could be talking about the topic for hours, I believe, because where is all this plastic going? What can we do to stop it? How can we see or put people or aware people about the consequences, not only about pandemics, but also climate change. There are a million questions that I have on mind, but sadly we have to close this interview right now.
I forgot to tell you in the last answer, the question of the erosion of biodiversity has become much more relevant, because there is a clear connection between the erosion of biodiversity, deforestation, and the moving from the virus moving from the forest to areas where interaction with humans, okay, or domestic animals. And this increases a lot the dangers of new emerging virus, for example. Exactly. This is something in which the Amazon is very relevant. We have been lucky so far that no major virus, emerging virus, has moving away from the Amazon, but this could happen at any moment.
We have to be aware of that too. Thank you very much, Dr. Viola. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for Forum 2000 for hosting this conversation. And we hope to talk again in the future. Goodbye.
With pleasure. Goodbye.